real us is pure love, pure life. Hi, I'm Sierra, your mindfulness Sherpa with Painted Porch Strategies, and I am joined by Rob Hunter and Amy Yakowski. And you have arrived at our book club. This is the Painted Porch Strategies book club. And we have started a new book this month, and it is called The Four Agreements. Yep, hold them up if you got them. The Four Agreements. I think Rob read it on Kindle, right? There you go. There's this book. The beauty of 2022, right? So many ways. The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So I'm dying to know what you guys thought. We haven't talked at all about it. It's been like the hush hush secret. But this was my jam of this book. I loved this book so far. Everything is God. Everything is made of light. So if light is reflecting light, then we're all made of the same stuff as stars. And one of the jumping off points here, this is a book of Toltec wisdom. And in the Toltec lineage there's a belief that we are all God. We are all made of the same stuff. We are all equal. We are all beautiful. And so we're starting from this concept that if light reflects light, then everything should be great and groovy. What do you guys think about this idea?
Well, I think it's just a beautiful concept with how it's set up. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I love the idea that it's a very stoic idea as well. You know, we on the porch here focus on the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. That's kind of the foundation of a lot of our learnings and our lessons and our advisory that we provide. And it's a very similar concept that we are all made of the same stuff. You know, there's that quote from Marcus Aurelius where he says that we are all made of the same flesh, same blood, same bones. We all share those same attributes. And so because of that, it's part of our human nature to work with one another, not against each other. How about you, Rob?
It's funny because it's almost incongruent. Like that theory is true, but we're born and all of those nature things start working against us, start shaping us, start molding us, start creating these barriers between that collaboration. And that's where I think this book, The Four Agreements, gets down to it. We're going to give ourselves 4 agreements. And if we abide by these 4 agreements, we can understand all that has shaped us, all the positive, all the maybe not so positive, and understand what all that means to help us relate to other people. But in that vein, the first agreement, it starts with us as individuals. We got to master ourselves before we can really get into this complete collaborative space.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'm glad, so it sounds like you guys are grasping the concept. So one of the things that I think is misleading is the title, The Four Agreements. When we think of agreements, we think of like, yes, okay, I agree with you. And in a way, he's kind of twisting this on its head. So the way he poses it is in the Toltec wisdom is that you were not given a choice on a lot of things. It was not your choice to speak English. It was not your choice to be taken to the church you were taken to. It was not your choice. The people who surrounded you, some of those choices were predetermined. And then as people taught you things, whether it be in a classroom or just by saying things to you, if you listened and you agreed, then it became your belief. But not all of these beliefs are true. These are just what you agreed with as you understood them. So he talks about how these agreements do not have to be set in stone. If you have an agreement that has been taught to you, that you have agreed with, that has become your belief, but it is causing you suffering, you can choose to make a new agreement. And what these 4 agreements are about, choosing the way that you want to live, which is absolutely Stoic Principle 101.
Yes, what is within your complete control? And one of the pieces that is within your complete control is deciding who you want to be and how you want to live and how you want to show up. Do you want to show up as a beam of light? Or do you want to, unintentionally or otherwise, do you want to show up as a cloud of smoke or have fog or smoke, right? He talks about the smoky mirror, the cloud of smoke that is preventing your light from shining through. And a lot of that is because of those. I loved, the term agreement. It was like, I see what you're doing there. It's turning it on its head a little bit. It's almost like if we were to think about it from a modern stance, it's like your programming. It's your code, your operating system. Who wrote your code? And a lot of that code oftentimes is handed down, is written by other people, unbeknownst or, outside of your control, when at least when you're very little and you're starting to grow up, what you're supposed to believe, how you're supposed to behave, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. All of those pieces are those agreements or that code that is forming your operating system.
So show of hands.
95% of it is a great quote.
When they said about an agreement that you were taught, show of hands if that triggered you a little bit. You were like, oh.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
As soon as they defined it like that, I was like, okay, I get it. All right. Sorry, Rob, you were saying.
No, totally fine. I just wanted to read one of the quotes. 95% of the beliefs we have stored in our minds are nothing but lies. And we suffer because we believe all these lies. So Albert Einstein said, question everything. And there's a scene in the movie Training Day. What up, Denzel? Denzel's sitting at the table in this diner across from Ethan Hawke. And Denzel's reading a newspaper. And he's reading the newspaper, and Ethan Hawke's character sits down and he's trying to talk to Denzel. And he goes, I read this. I think he says 90% BS, 90% bullshit, but it entertains me. So now you entertain me. So that's the idea, that most of the input we have, if you just accept it as not necessarily bullshit, but it comes from someone else's programming that Amy just mentioned. And you're getting it from that lens. It doesn't mean that it is true. It just means that that's person's expression of their being in this moment, if I could try to be existential like this book is. And understanding that opens up your entire world to way less judgment, which I believe is the first essence of the first agreement, is to try to move as far away from judgment as possible. Obviously, there are some judgments that will keep you alive in a real life or death situation. However, those are very rare in the modern day 2022 world. So even though we went through a pandemic, right? And that's why I think that the essence of this is understanding that we need to have a broader filter overall and go a lot easier on our own selves because we've been programmed a certain way.
I loved how he used the term domestication of the person, which, and he even says, he's like, it's very much like the domestication of a dog or a cat.
Yeah.
It's how they're trained and what is their training and how is that training impacting them the way they behave or they don't, right? Are they more fearful? Are they hesitant to do things because of the training, the domestication that they've received from their life, their experiences?
Yes. But what I love is in this book, he doesn't let us dwell on that too much. He basically says, okay, like all the things that you were in agreement with that became your belief because they were kind of fed to you, if they're causing you suffering, now I'm going to teach you some tools so that you can transform out of those agreements and into the agreements that help you move with the light, right? So if we're trying to go back to the light, if we're trying to remove the smoke from the mirrors and clear it up, it's going to start with us. So let's jump into the first agreement. So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Yes.
When I first read this, I thought it was basically, mean what you say and that's really what you initially interpret when you think about being impeccable with your word, being honest, being in that respect. But he definitely takes it a very different way. So talk to us about that, Sierra. Yeah.
a little bit of a different way. So I think all those things you just said are true because that's your interpretation. But it breaks down, and this is where I totally was like, oh, Amy Yak is going to be all about this. He gets into the Latin of the word impeccable.
Uh-huh.
On the word impeccable, it means without sin. And he says, hold up. I know I say sin, and you automatically think of a religious connotation. He says, but a sin is anything that goes against yourself. So now he says, now I'm putting it into a commonplace way. So sin is anything that goes against yourself. So to be impeccable with your word is to not use words or promises that go against yourself. And then he says, not only take responsibility, but do not judge or blame yourself, because judging or blaming yourself is going against yourself. It's going away from the light. It's going into the dark. What did you guys think? Were you guys ready for that little twist?
I loved it. Rob, what were your thoughts on that?
It's a reminder to understand that you will make mistakes, and it's what you do with that mistake, because he has a quote, how many times do we pay for one mistake? The answer, thousands of times. The human is the only animal on earth that pays 1,000 times for the same mistake. The rest of the animals pay once for every mistake they make. So it reminds you of the complexity that we get to be, which is the fun part about being a human, right? An ant has a great purpose. Ants are great collaborators, but ants don't speak. Ants don't analyze their entire lives the way we do. They don't live as long as we do. So there's that understanding that any interaction with another human being, there's an infinite amount of possibilities based on where that person come from, what their programming is, and the same for you. And the three of us in this group right here, and you watching us, all of us interacting, anything could happen. That's what's you have to, I think he's getting at, is to understand that that's the basic programming of all people. And when you understand that everyone's a little bit different, but we're all based on that same principle. From birth to now, what has shaped us, what our beliefs are. Many people will never analyze their own beliefs, either for me, for the first, 38 years of my life, I didn't even know there was this concept that you could challenge your own beliefs in a certain way, or you hang on to the past too much and pay for that mistake 1,000 times over. And the essence is that self-love, back to what you started with, Sierra, it's respecting yourself enough to understand when you make a mistake, learn the lesson, try not to repeat, not to linger on that mistake and say, I'm a bad person. Oh my God, I'm awful. Because I think deep down, we all have some type of I'm not good enough belief. Right. Somewhere in there, it may not be a version of that, but there is some belief most of us, probably all of us, have that holds us back in a way. This is the key to freedom, to understanding that all it is a survival mechanism. And then when you understand what it is on a base level, then you can do whatever you want with it. You can say, oh, that's not real, or, oh, there it is again. Or you can really dwell on it and it will hold you back. So this is the key, I think.
If you touchstone back to, if we're all made out of the same stuff, if we're all just pure light, and if everything is God and everything is made of light, then by you being cruel to yourself or hard on yourself, you're being hard on everyone. Do you mean to be unkind to everyone? Because if we're all the same stuff, then it's all the same energy, right? Moving, that light bouncing. So what he's trying to get us to shift away from is not that you think so much of yourself. It's that if you think of yourself as a collective, then your way of improving everything is by improving yourself, by being that mirror reflection as opposed to the smoke.
Yeah. Well, I love how how he grasps so much on the word, what word means. He expresses your word or word as the ultimate power. It's how everything is created. And I loved that because it really is true. It's that word, those thoughts, those beliefs, or the literal words that you utter. That is where all power is created or destroyed. It's through the words that you are using. And that it tied so much, Rob, into what you really talk about in your program, Master Your Message, which is your internal communication. All effective communication starts with how you speak to yourself, because how you speak to yourself is how you speak to others. The words you use, the language you choose, whether that language is positive, neutral, or negative, all of those have impact in the relationships, in the influence, in everything that you have in your life.
Correct. But
I just summarized it.
That's why we started Master Your Message, our program here at Painted Porch Strategies, with your internal communication. It's the concept that your mind plays tricks on you. And this is why. I mean, the words we use are everything. The only reason we're able to do this is because we have a common language. Sure, dolphins make noises, birds make noises, and they communicate in a certain way, but it's not as complex, at least to our understanding. It's not as complex as human interactions, because we have these things called words that can make or break a relationship. And when your internal feelings come out, especially in a negative way, they really impact other people and our relationships with other people, because they're often reflections upon us and what we're feeling at the moment. Because when you're feeling a little anxious, feeling a little angry, and you're communicating in that sense, when you have that body feel, you're not like, hi, how are you? It's great to see you guys. You're like, tense. And then you communicate in a tense way, and it creates tension.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And whether it's playing tricks or the smoke in the mirrors, it's the same exact concept. It gets mucked up. And he would say this is what causes all this suffering. He even says the hell that most of us live in. And he says, if you want to get back to a more heavenly or enjoyable or blissful, joyful state, you have to change the agreements that you're deciding to agree upon within your own actions. So these are actionable steps. Now, I love when he's talking about this, how he says gossip is the worst kind of magic. It is like pure poison. So when you think about gossip, you're usually talking about somebody else behind their back to other people. So you are sinning against yourself because you're saying something ugly about somebody, and you're not even saying it to their face. It's most likely not even true, or it's expanded, and you're doing it in an effort to hurt that person. But by hurting that person, that is going against yourself. So you are sinning by doing that, by gossiping. And he says it's like an evil that spreads. Gossip is the absolute worst. He also talks about how your word is planting a seed. And anytime your word, we'll just say what you speak, but could be your actions as well, the energy you put out is planting a seed in everybody who sees it or hears it. And then what happens to those seeds depend on the environment to which they've been planted. So if I say a bit of gossip and you both hear it, Rob and Amy, you hear that gossip, and then you start to panic about it, and then you start to spread that gossip, that seed has implanted, it has grown roots, it is growing, it is thriving, it is spreading that pure poison. What he's trying to hint at is, if that seed is thrown at you and you do nothing with it, then that pure evil, that pure poison cannot spread. So there's a choice even when bad things happen around you or when bad seeds are thrown your way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that, because as soon as I read that, it made me think, Sierra, of your program, Radical Mindfulness, because you talk a lot about the seeds you want to plant, the seeds of virtue that you want to plant, and the weeds that you want to pull out. And he touches on that too when he talks about how fertile is the ground, how fertile is your ground to accept the good seeds versus letting those weeds start to, infest that, that garden of we'll say flourishing or prosperity that you want to possess. He talks about when it comes to gossip, to add to what you said, that can lead to misinformation. And he even says here, one little piece of misinformation can break down communication between people, causing every person it touches to become infected and contagious to others. And I love, he even makes it akin to a computer virus. You know, if we think about if our agreements are our operating system, that gossip and those weeds that we allow to stay, they spread like a vine, they spread like a computer virus, and they can infect the way you operate. And it can also then, you know, if it's like a big virus, you know, if you send an email that has a fake link in it and someone clicks on that link, they're now infected, they've been hacked, right?
Yeah.
So how are you, how perverse is that virus spreading in your ecosystem, in your human ecosystem that you operate within?
Yeah. And that's something that's so easy for us to envision, is how quickly that could pervade. But your word has power.
Yes.
So here is the action item of the first agreement. Impeccable with your word. But how are we going to do that? He tells us, start with yourself. He challenges us first to, when you speak to yourself, words of love. I'm fantastic. I did really great at that. I'm a great friend. I'm enjoying my life. Speak to yourself in words of love. And when you put enough of these new agreements of coming from a place of love, of light to yourself, you are going to break the strength of those old agreements that were causing you suffering. So we're going to drown out all that crap with stuff we want to hear. Now, I know you might be thinking, oh, that sounds so cheesy. You want me to give myself self-praise? Yes, that is exactly what I want you to do. But I'm going to remind you, take it out of yourself. If everything is God and everything is light and we're all made of the same light, aren't you, by showing love to yourself, actually showing love to everyone else?
Wonderfully stated. I also love, though, even with the be impeccable with your word to yourself, I liked how he took it and even took a spin on it and said, even if you talk nice to yourself or you use good words to yourself, but you are not doing that to others, you are still being, I'll say, you're still harming yourself, because that is going to come back on you. So it's not just your own self-talk. It starts with that. It starts with that internal communication, as Rob talks about in Master Your Message. But also the words you say to other people actually impact you too. I think he says if you spread a piece of gossip, or if you say something that's not very nice to someone, through that they are going to not like you as much, which then harms yourself. So I like how he took it and spun it, where it wasn't just the way you talk to yourself, but how you talk to others actually affects you directly as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bottom line, it comes down to this: be kind. It's funny how that is really the essence of so much of these type of thinkings, like the 4 agreements. But it starts with being kind to yourself, which is, I think, the kindness so often we have the most difficulty with, because being a human is difficult. It is. It's okay to accept that. Like, there's challenges every single day to being a human, whether they're something at work, whether it's driving in traffic, whether it's with your partners or with your friends. There's always challenging situations. So embrace that, because the complexity that we get to experience is pretty freaking cool. Like, I imagine that it's better than being a squirrel. You know?
Always looking for a nut.
Yeah.
Squirrel always looking
Well,
for a nut.
and maybe there's the beauty in being a squirrel, because it is a simpler process. But that's not how we were born. We were born as ourselves, brought into this world. So you can appreciate even the complexities and go, whoa, this is kind of cool that I get to experience it, even if it sucks.
Right. Well, and also to that end, Rob, I'll just add one final thought from my perspective, and that is it being impeccable with your word to yourself. If you struggle with that, it's recognizing what agreements, what programming is maybe getting in the way, to use a term that you use, Rob, what tricks has your mind been playing on you? And can you begin to start to recognize what those tricks, what those agreements may be that are impacting the way you are speaking to yourself or the way that you're communicating with other people? What, to use another phrase, what, bullshit rules or rules have been programmed in you that are causing you to think a certain way, speak a certain way, talk about people in a certain way, judge them in a certain way? What is that programming that you need to, we're not saying you rewrite it overnight. Sometimes it's really complex code, but it starts by recognizing what's the underlying trigger here? What's happening underneath the surface that's causing me to think, act, behave this way?
Okay, so guys, 30 seconds or less. I want you to tell me where you're going to start in your being impeccable with your word. What is one phrase you're going to say when you speak to yourself or speak to someone else that's going to start you on this path? I'll start with Rob.
We're all equal.
I will say, I got this.
Say, I love you.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
All right, so we are just about out of time, but this was our first segment of the 4 agreements, and we talked about the whole introduction. We talked about this whole concept, and we dove into the first agreement: be impeccable with your word. Next week, come back and join us. We're going to be talking about the second agreement, maybe even the third agreement. I don't know. You're just going to have to wait and see. But your assignment is this: start somewhere. Be impeccable with your words. Start planting that seed, a seed from love and light, away from fear, away from gossip and black magic. Start there, see how it feels, see what's happening. For Sierra, for Amy, for Rob, we are Painted Porch Strategies. This is the 4 agreements, and we'll see you next time.